In a major defeat for Donald Trump's attacks on American universities, a federal judge has blocked his attempt to freeze more than $2 billion from Harvard University in the name of fighting anti-Semitism. The judge called that justification a smokescreen. I'm Adam Klasfeld, and you're watching All Rise News on Legal AF here on the Midas Touch Network. And today, I'm going to go deep into an 84-page ruling by U.S. District Judge Allison Burroughs, because it's one of those rulings that's the exact opposite of the cold record. It is passionate, it is fiery, and it speaks to a broader trend of Trump's attacks on U.S. universities and the fight for academic freedom in the United States. And in this ruling, Judge Burroughs zeroes in on Trump's justification for the attacks on Harvard and other universities, the claim that he's fighting anti-Semitism. And here's the heart of her ruling. She says that Trump, quote, used anti-Semitism as a smokescreen for a targeted, ideologically motivated assault on this country's premier universities, end quotes. Now, she says that this attack had victims for the public at large. Quote, their actions have jeopardized decades of research and the welfare of all those who could stand to benefit from that research, as well as reflect a disregard for the rights protected by the Constitution and federal statutes. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Judge Burroughs, because she is someone who takes anti-Semitism seriously. The Forward, a historic Jewish newspaper, spoke about the history of her Jewish family going back to her grandfather, who escaped anti-Jewish persecution in Russia. He escaped the pogroms. Quote, he stowed away in a ship at age 14, landing in Portland, Maine, speaking no English and with no money. So Burroughs knows a thing or two about anti-Semitism, which is baked into her family history. Here's what she writes, quote, the idea that fighting anti-Semitism is defendants' true aim is belied by the fact that the majority of the demands they are making of Harvard to restore its research funding are directed on their face at Harvard's governance, staffing, and hiring practices and admissions policies, all of which have little to do with anti-Semitism and everything to do with their power and political views, end quote. She found that the Trump administration violated the First Amendment and multiple federal statutes. She writes in the ruling, quote, the First Amendment is important and the right to free speech must be zealously guarded. Free speech has always been a hallmark of our democracy, end quote. In her ruling, she points out that Trump's funding cuts hurt Jewish people in particular, and more broadly, it hurt, quote, the health and welfare of our country and the world. What were some of those funding cuts? Here's from the ruling again, quote, the research was frozen without any sort of investigation into whether particular labs were engaging in anti-Semitic behavior, were employing Jews, were run by Jewish scientists, or were investigating issues or diseases particularly pertinent to Jews, such as, for example, Tay-Sachs disease, meaning that the funding freezes could and likely will harm the very people defendants profess to be protecting. And it is unlikely that any Jew, even one directly impacted by anti-Semitism, would be in favor of stopping research on, for example, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, or autism, to name a few, as a means of redressing their unrelated harm. She said that Trump's problem wasn't really with anti-Semitism, but its First Amendment speech. Quote, Harvard is currently, even if belatedly, taking steps it needs to take to combat anti-Semitism and seems willing to do even more if need be. Now it is the job of the courts to similarly step up, to act to safeguard academic freedom and freedom of speech as required by the Constitution, and to ensure that important research is not improperly subjected to arbitrary and procedurally infirm grant terminations, even if doing so risks the wrath of a government committed to its agenda no matter the cost. And that's the note that she chooses to end on here. And it's a very impactful note because Judge Burroughs has been targeted personally by Donald Trump when she's ruled against him in other Harvard-related litigation. Trump has called her, quote, a total disaster in screaming capital letters on his social media platform. And when he attacks judges on his social media platform, as he has done before, there has been a history of threats against those judges. And some of those judges have spoken out about those threats publicly in a recent extraordinary press conference where they said that they were threatened and their family has been threatened. But the Trump administration is still attacking Judge Burroughs. After the ruling, they called her an activist, Obama-appointed judge. They're almost certainly going to be appealing this ruling, and this is not the last we're going to hear from this ruling. But on a very interesting note, 2 days before this ruling, the Boston Globe published a remarkable story about their lead attorney in the Justice Department handling this case, a man by the name of Michael Velchik, who is a Harvard undergrad himself. And during his time at Harvard University, the Boston Globe found, Mr. Velchik submitted a paper that was written from the perspective of Adolf Hitler. According to the Globe, the assignment was for the students to write a paper from the point of view of a controversial figure. And the instructor in his class was so disturbed that Velchik had chosen Adolf Hitler as the figure that he viewed as merely controversial that he had him redo the assignment. And lest anyone thinks this was an isolated incident, the Boston Globe reviewed emails and found that Velchik had praised a book he had recently read, Adolf Hitler's anti-Semitic screed, Mein Kampf. Velchik, once again, is a lawyer who has argued before a federal judge that Harvard's funding must be cut in the name of combating anti-Semitism. And Judge Burroughs thought that he did a good job of it. And she remarked in a hearing that his Harvard education had paid off. But she ultimately found that the supposed attempt to combat anti-Semitism wasn't the Trump administration's true aim. And little wonder about that. You've been watching All Rise News here on the Legal AF channel of the Midas Touch Network. If you want to go deeper into some of the topics that I've been exploring here, visit www.allrisenews.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter, and if you become a paid subscriber, you can get full access to some of the topics that I'm talking about. And to watch videos like these, make sure you get alerted about them, hit subscribe, and don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.